When I moved to San Francisco, it was December 31st, 1976.
Okay.
When I arrived in San Francisco.
And then how did you end up meeting the people that became the Avengers?
Well, one of the first things I saw when I got to town was this amazing poster, this flyer that was up on all the poles, and it was for a band called Crime, and they were playing at a club called the Mabuhay Gardens, this weird little Filipino supper club. And I decided that I would go down there and see what was up with that, because their posters were so cool. Actually, Danny O'Brien, who was one of the people involved in forming the Avengers, had just been going to the Art Institute. So we crossed paths somewhere, probably at school, but I think he had already dropped out. And he was planning on, we started to go out, and he was planning on starting a band, and he brought his friend Greg up from Fullerton, Orange County, and Greg was a guitar player, and they decided they were going to start a band, and Danny was living in this big warehouse with a bunch of other artists, and they had a PA set up. I guess they were rehearsing, and one day they were all gone, and I was in there, and I started messing around with the PA and singing through the microphone, and I just fell in love with the power of amplification. I was like, this is awesome. I'm so loud. Then they came back. I was like, I'm your singer. I'm going to be in your band. And then I think the first bass player we had, Jonathan Postal, was a student, photography student at the Art Institute. He played with us for about 4 shows, and then we replaced him with Jimmy Wilsey, who was this kid from St. Louis. And he was playing on the streets. He was playing guitar on the streets, and he just knew a bunch of people and wanted to be a musician. And we were like, well, can you play bass? He's like, of course I can. It's like guitar with 4 strings, you know. He didn't really say that, but he leapt into that position and held it for the rest of the time. And the band was formed.
What year was that? 70?
I was 77. I think our first performance was possibly in May at the warehouse, and it was just a party. And we just learned, this is with Jonathan Postal, I think. We just learned a bunch of cover songs. Lou Reed, Patti Smith, The Who, just a bunch. And then we played for people, and they were, hanging out and dancing and stuff. And then we got invited to do a show at the Mabuhay, and I think that show was in June. And before that show, I went to LA and visited my friends Tometa and Tommy, who'd moved from Seattle to LA and formed the Screamers. And I told them I was starting this band and what we were doing, and they were like, oh, well, you can't do cover songs. You got to write your own songs. And I was like, oh, well, our show's, it's in 5 days. And they were like, so, write 5 songs.
Yeah.
So we came back and we wrote a bunch of songs, and actually some of those songs stuck, interestingly. So that first week before that show, we were inspired to get to work. And I think we wrote like 5 or 6 songs that we played that night.
What was the first song you guys wrote that you remember standing out?
Well, out of that 5, I think we had Car Crash. We had I Believe in Me. Some other ones that maybe didn't stick. My Boyfriend's a Pinhead. I Love the Ramones. Vernon is a Fag. And I think there's one more, and I can't remember what it is. Vernon is a Fag. It's kind of a hilarious song. It was a piece of graffiti that was sprayed over a lot of San Francisco right at the moment we were looking for song titles. I was like, oh, that's cool. Danny wrote that. It was a pretty funny song. But Car Crash and I Believe in Me, I believe, were in the first handful of songs. And the first show we did, so it was the Nuns were having a party at the Mabuhay because they were opening for Brian Ferry or somebody at some big show. And so this was kind of the after party.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a party celebrating their like moment of glory. And we somehow were invited to do a short set. And it was really our first public performance. I remember getting on stage, being a little bit nervous. I was 19 at the time. And the band started playing. And I was like, I can't remember how this song goes. I don't remember any of the words. I don't know when I'm coming in or what to sing. This is a nightmare. I just can't do this. I'm not cut out. And then they all suddenly stopped playing. And one of them said, what are you playing? And they said, I'm playing this. And the other one said, oh, well, we're playing that. And they were playing 2 different songs.
Oh, that'll be confusing for anybody.
Because we'd written the song list wrong or something. I don't know who wrote the set list, but it was like, oh, okay. So then they started the song, all playing the same song. And then suddenly it all came back to me. And I knew how to sing, and I knew the lyrics, and I knew when to come in. It was like, okay, thank God. But there was this little brief moment where I just thought, oh, I've completely blanked out, and I don't know what to do. Oh, God. But anyway, after that little hurdle, we went on. And there are people who say, that was the most awesome show the Avengers ever played, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
Well, that's good. What other notable moments stand out for you during the original Avengers run?
When we played with the Sex Pistols, is pretty memorable. And it was memorable, one, because it was terrifying, because the audience was huge. The stage, the Nuns played first. They were not happy about that. Mm-hmm. They actually called me and said, do you want to change places with us? That's fine with us. And I was like, no, thanks so much for the offer. Don't think so. So by the time they'd finished playing, the stage was completely covered in spit.
Oh, yeah.
People have been throwing things and spitting. And this audience of 6,000 people was bigger than the Sex Pistols I'd ever played to, and certainly bigger than anybody we'd ever played to. And we knew all the punks in LA and all the punks in San Francisco, and we didn't know who these people were and where they came from, but they had kind of learned how to act, and and one of the things they learned was that you spit. So when I first walked out into the spotlight on that big stage and that big audience, I slipped in some spit. I didn't fall all the way to the stage, but it was just like, fuck, where am I? What am I doing here?
That's got to be kind of shocking because you're not really used to that type of punk where they're spitting at you. That wasn't really a San Francisco thing, right?
Yeah, plus, how many people are going to spit at the Mabuhay? Maybe a few, but it's not enough.
It's not 5,000 people.
I went out in the audience when the Sex Pistols were playing, and I tried to get up close to the stage, as close as I could. And when I was, still maybe 20 feet from the stage, it was so tight, it's so packed, and I was completely covered with sweat, but it was not my sweat. And I could probably have lifted my feet off the ground and not moved an inch. So it was really kind of unbearable in the audience. And I noticed that from when we were performing. I felt like if I spotted one of my friends for just a split second, I'd look back and they would have disappeared. And it was just this sea of heads all smashed together, kind of like, it looked unpleasant.
Music Life Radio. Stories at the intersection of